Are you trying to work at home with your child and getting nowhere? Believe me, I know how frustrating it could be. After all, you're putting in the time and the effort and you're seeing very little progress. I have been there before, deep down in the trenches, trying to educate my own daughter. So, if your child is still using flashcards to learn their ABCs, they're filling school readiness worksheets that look like this. It's time to reassess how children learn best. That is why I created a 3-part series where you could supercharge your child's learning and you can explore how the young mind learns best. In this first part of this series, you will discover how the brain is built to learn. In the second part, I will show you how to improve your child's learning process using 5 simple steps. And then be sure to stay tuned to part 3, where we will integrate everything we have learned into mini lessons. So now, part 1, let's get to it. Here's my story. At the beginning of the pandemic, I found myself, just like many of you, struggling to homeschool my own 3-year-old child. Completely outside of my scope as a PhD neuroscientist, with over a decade of experience studying the brain, I decided to do what I do best, experiment with my own child. So, after countless of hours of reading parenting books, child psychology, education books and articles, and through trial and error, I gained some valuable insights, which I will share with you now. Why do the first 5 years of a child's life matter for learning? Well, learning for a young child begins long before they enter kindergarten. It is in fact similar to building your own dream home, where you would first need to build a blueprint and establish a foundation and a design for your house. So a child is born with a predetermined genetic code, that's their blueprint, and that is the foundation upon which all other knowledge will be constructed. Once the sturdy foundation is set in place, then it is time to execute the building plans and the blueprint outlines. As for your child, the significant brain wiring in the first few years of life is built upon all the novel experiences and the social-emotional interactions that the child has early on. So this efficient programming in the brain and those brain circuits serve as the building blocks and the foundations of the neuroarchitecture that will follow your child well into adulthood. Scientists now recognize that 90% of a child's brain development occurs in the first 5 years of life, when the brain making more than 1 million new connections per second. The brain is super dynamic and it will mature and grow up until mid to late 20s. And as the neuroscientist Jay Gidd points out, even though the first 3 years are super important, so are the next 16. So we have to keep this in mind, that these ages between 3 and 16, there's still enormous dynamic activity happening in terms of brain biology. So all of you super parents and great educators out there, your journey is just beginning. How does your child's brain work? The nervous system contains building blocks we call neurons or nerve cells, and their primary function is to send and receive chemical messages along spaces that are called synapses. This model shows you what an active brain looks like when the neurons are firing and exchanging information. This happens when we are awake and or even when we are asleep. This process underlies our thoughts, feelings, actions, and behaviors. So why is your child's brain so amazing? Well, babies are born with twice as many neurons as they will have in adulthood. For the brain to function at its highest efficiency, the synapses must be cut or pruned, similar to trimming rose bushes in a garden. It's an evolutionary process that nature has cleverly designed called synaptic pruning, and it begins 8 months after birth and continues through adulthood, where the connections that are least often used in the brain gets chewed off by cellular processes, whereas the most used brain connections and those networks become stronger, faster, more efficient, and voila! You got yourself a specialized brain, well adapted for its environment. This important concept in the neuroscience field is called use it or lose it. And going back to our dream house analogy, imagine now that a decade has passed and your kitchen is very outdated. Now we must do a full remodel and we want to change the countertops to this gorgeous marble. So out with the old and in with the new. We might preserve some of those appliances that are in good condition, such as our stoves and our microwave. So as the child brain changes and grows and adapts in a novel environment and experiences, it forms new synaptic connections that are revising the old brain circuits, replacing it with the newfound knowledge the child acquires. These important experiences that are connected to social emotional intelligence, relationships in the child's life, these are the brain circuits that will form in the young child's mind. We call this remarkable ability of the brain neuroplasticity, and in fact, it forms the basis of learning. Now, armed with this new neurobiological knowledge, you can now work with your child to strengthen these brain connections during early childhood, which will be fundamental to future success. Just imagine all of the possibilities. Now, for a deeper look into the brain architecture in development, please visit my blog entitled The Neuroscience of How Children Learn Best, which will be described and linked in the description below. And now let's discuss the stages of child brain development. Children's brains are built from the bottom up. This means that the simple neural networks evolve first, followed by the more complex ones. For instance, a child learning how to walk involves gross motor skills. So first, they do that before they learn how to draw with a pencil, which involves the fine motor skills. Setting a strong foundation at the beginning of a child's life is essential, as the higher level networks sequentially form upon the lower level networks. So now let's briefly discuss the stages in detail of a child's development. We start with the prenatal stage. So the 5 senses begin to function in utero. These sensory experiences develop the child's nervous system in preparation for life outside of the womb. For more fascinating information on this topic, please see my blog entitled Does My Developing Fetus Have a Personality?, which I will link in the description below. Next, we have children ages 0 to 3. For this stage, there's a rapid period of brain development and literally an explosion in neuron networks and building new brain connections. Relationships and social emotional security form the basic foundations upon which all other learning will proceed. And finally, we have the school-age children, where at this point in their lives, during normal development, they have to scaffold their learning and build upon a solid foundation that they acquired during the early years. That is why it's crucial that we get it right from the start during the child's early life. Now that you have a better understanding of the inner workings of the child's mind, you can use daily experiences to positively influence the neurodevelopmental outcomes. Please join us for part 2 of this series, where I will reveal how to elevate your child's learning experience using 5 key concepts taken from the neuroscience and child psychology field. And don't forget to visit my blog at littleneurons.com.